Okay, so now we want to get into the JavaScript, which is actually going to be fairly simple. And I plan on this being one of the first projects, at least in the first 10. So I'm going to explain kind of stuff that many of you might already know. Now, remember that the whole thing, what we need to do is just change the class really on each of these. So the first one has a class of active right now. If I put that class on the second one just manually by typing it in here, it's going to show the second one. So I'm going to start with that on the first like I had, but we want to be able to switch that in our JavaScript. So we need to first bring in all of these panels into our JavaScript files. So I'm going to create a variable called panels, and there's different ways to select elements. We can use get element by ID. We can use query selector. So what query selector does is allows us to select anything. It could be a paragraph, an H1, a class, an ID, whatever. We want the panels, which have a class of panel. Now the problem here is there's more than one panel, right? We have all these divs with panels, so we can't just do this or it's just going to select the first one. So we need to use query selector all in that case. And with query selector all, instead of just selecting the element directly, it puts all of the panels into what's called a node list, which is similar to an array. In fact, I can show you that if I console log here panels, and we open up our Chrome DevTools here, you'll see that it prints out this node list with each div and some properties. And I can target specific panels. Like if I put 0 in here, because arrays are 0 index, it's going to give me the very first panel. You can see it has the class of active. So I could get the second one with 1 and so on. Now you can also loop through a node list just like you can with an array, and that's what I want to do. I want to take my panels and use a for each, which is a high order array method, and these methods take in a function as an argument. So you could do function, or what you usually see is an arrow function like this. Okay, and then we need to pass in here whatever we want to use for each iteration. These are panels, so I'm going to use panel, singular. And I can console log here, panel, and it's just going to loop through and show me each panel. Now, what do we actually want to do here? We want to have an event listener on each of these so that if we click it, something happens. So we'll take each panel and say add event listener, and I want to listen for a click. And when that click happens, we're going to run a function. And for that function, let's just do a console log here, and I'll just say, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. And if I click on any of these, we're going to log 1, 2, 3. So I want to, whatever one we click on, I want to add a class of active. So if I say panel.classList, that gives me a list of the classes. But we also have methods on this class list object like add, where we can specifically add a class, and I'm going to add a class of active. So now, let me just close this. If I click on this one, it gets added the class of active, which then changes it to flex 5. If I click on this one, same thing, but you can see that active is still on these other ones, so it's expanding them, but it's not retracting the other ones. So what we'll do is before we put a class of active, let's remove the class of active on all of the other ones. So I'm going to have a function here called remove active classes, and we'll create that down here as a function remove active classes. Now since there's more than one panel, we're going to loop through them and then remove all the active classes. So we're going to do just what we did above, so panel.forEach, and in here we'll put an arrow function. Now when you have an arrow function with just one argument like this, because we can also get the index, we can get the complete array, but since we only need this one panel, we don't even need these these parentheses. We can just do this. All right, and up here we can do the same thing. I mean, you can keep them if you want, but you don't have to. And then in here, let's say for the particular panel that we're looping through, we want on the class list, object we want to call remove, and we want to remove all the active classes. Oops. Okay, so now what's going to happen is when we click, it's going to remove all the active classes from all of them and then put the active class on the one we click. So if I click here, looks like I messed something up. Panel is not defined. Oh, panels. So we're looping through panels here, which is coming from here. All right, so if I click on this, now you'll see we get the effect that we want, because right before it adds the active class to this, it takes it off the rest of them. Now, one thing I would like to change though is as soon as I click on this, you'll see the H3 and it has that kind of weird falling down effect. So let's add a transition to the opacity on the H3. So I'm going to go to the active H3 and let's add a transition here, and let's say opacity. So we want to add a transition on the opacity 0.3 seconds and ease in. And let's add a delay as well. So we'll add 0.4 seconds on the delay. And now if I click, you see that it doesn't actually fade in until the card is fully expanded, which is a lot smoother than how it was before. Okay, so that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, you can make these into any kind of card. It doesn't have to be just a heading with a background image. It could be like a testimonial or absolutely anything you want. So hopefully this helps you in building further projects with little widgets like this.